The bike states that you got a book as well, Demaras.
Yes.
I mean, I haven't seen it. Can you tell me something about it?
It'll be off the press in 2 weeks in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And it's 360 some pages. And I'm publishing it myself.
Oh.
And the first printing is 5,000 copies.
No. Can you tell me something about it? What is it about? I mean, you cannot judge by the album, obviously. I mean, the story has to be more cohesive, if I may say. So.
There is, the book is written, it's a book for people who hate to read, and it's written in the style of a screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
So that each situation is described in terms of what a camera would see, what the physical action is, what the people say, and what they do. And so it takes you very quickly through complicated situations where if you'd written it as a normal book, it would be like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fiction book, and it's very funny.
Has it got anything to do with the album? I mean, can the album be used as a soundtrack to it, or?
Well, the way it works is the book, you know what the unified field theory is, you know?
I'm afraid not.
Well, in physics they have this thing that they've been looking for, is the unified field theory that explains the interrelationship between how gravity works, you know, atomic energy, all this stuff. You know, they're looking for one equation that explains it all and makes it work, because right now there's contradictions. And let's just say that the book is like a unified field theory that will hold together Billy the Mountain, Gregory Peccary, Joe's Garage, Demaras, Thin Fish, all these different stories that shows you how they work together to make one long, really complicated story. And the Demaras album is only one part of this major release that is coming out here at the end of this year. There are 3 other albums that are released at approximately the same time. The Boulez album, the Francesco album, and the Thin Fish album. And the book relates. The Boulez album is not related to it, but all the rest of the stuff is related.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you read the book and listen to those 3, plus knowing from the past, Joe's Garage, Billy the Mountain, Gregory Peccary, then it would make an awful lot of sense to you. But other than that, it's very hard to describe.
The way you describe it, it comes as summation or culmination of what you've been working for the past 20 years, let's say.
Well, no, it doesn't really work like that. But for people, especially in Europe, when they want to know more about what the lyrics mean, if they can read English, the book will help them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they can't, it'll use them very much.
Any possibility for the book being issued in this country?
We'll have to find out. Since I'm paying to have it printed myself, I have to see whether or not I can sell enough of them in the United States. I haven't even spoken to any publishers about it. I took it to publishers in the United States and they were afraid of it, so I said, forget it, I'll just print it myself and sell it mail order.
But it's obvious, I mean, what's published nowadays, that anything serious, you know, doesn't really... It's only a dross being printed nowadays, as far as I can get it.
Yes, but when you talk to a U.S. publisher, they are more concerned that it look like a book. And this doesn't look like a book. It looks like a screenplay. And so they have taken the position that people won't read it because it doesn't say the leaves fell off the tree and it's 5 o'clock and it's all in paragraphs like that. But I personally don't like to read. I've said in other interviews, for me, reading is about as much fun as standing in line at the passport window in a French airport. That's like...
It's that exciting.
Yeah, that exciting. So, it's designed basically for people who would enjoy the albums, rather than for a literary audience.
Mm-hmm. Now saying that the book, which is in a book form obviously, is written like a screenplay. And the music you've been making for the past 20 years...
It's also written like a screenplay.
Yeah. You obviously have a certain disregard for what is considered a proper album. You know what I mean? one style, each song nicely defined. I mean, let's take Them or Us. It's there are different pieces, which I mean, by the today's industry standard, is way out. So, well, my question is, how have you managed to survive all these years in such a bitchy industry?
It's not even a matter of surviving in it, because I refuse to be stopped. You know, just because somebody, there's a big audience that wants albums that have all the same songs on it. And there's a number of other artists who do that. So they're never going to run out of material. They'll always have what they like. But the people who like what I do like variety. And they enjoy that experience of having the contrast between a song in one style with one kind of a sound followed by something completely different. To them, that's a refreshing experience. And that's the way I like to hear music. I like things next to each other that at first seem incongruous, but then when you step back and look at the whole thing, you see that it fits together properly.
Excuse me, do you mind if I take a couple of shots while you're talking? Do you want to focus? Thanks.
So in this contest of the previous question, what does a success mean to you?
Success to me is if I have a musical or let's say any kind of artistic concept, and I start out to execute it. If it is executed to 100% of the specifications of what I imagined when the idea first came up, that's success. That's the only thing that really matters to me, because if I don't enjoy listening to it myself when it's all done, why did I bother to do it? Because there are other things that I can do that make more money than this. This is a high overhead business. But I happen to like what I'm doing, so to me success is if you get close to 100%.
Another thing that Bio states is that your interest lies more within the serious music.
No. Let me explain to you about serious music. What most people regard as serious music is not really that serious at all. See, there's been a lot of propaganda about classical music since it was first invented. Let's examine the history of classical music briefly, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. When all the music that people regard as great masterpieces today were written for the amusement of kings, churches, or dictators. That's who was paying the rent. If the man who wrote the music happened to be working in a style that was appealing to the person who was paying for it at that time, he had a hit, he had a job, and he stayed alive. If he didn't,
and he was a pop star as well.
That's right. He could lose his fingers, he could lose his head, he could be exiled, or he'd starve to death. There was very little in between. All you have to do is look at a book called Grove's Dictionary of Music and Musicians. And you can see that throughout the ages, there have been guys who had hits and guys who didn't have hits. And it's not necessarily connected to the quality of what they wrote. It's connected to how well they pleased the patron that was paying the freight. And it's the same thing today. So all the norms, the acceptable norms of classical music, are really the taste norms of the church, the king, or the dictator that has been paying for it down through the ages. It was not the taste of the people. People never got to decide. So, when you say I have more of an interest in serious music, I take my work seriously, but I perceive it as entertainment. And it's entertainment for those people who like that sort of entertainment. I don't write for a king. I don't write for a church. I don't write for a government. I write for my friends. And that's the way the material should be perceived. It's entertainment for them.
So,
even if it's written for an orchestra, or it's written for a rock and roll band, it makes no difference. It's the same people who would listen to the music. I have several orchestral albums, okay? Those are not purchased by people who go out and buy the Dvorak New World Symphony. They're bought by rock and roll consumers. A special type of rock and roll consumer.
So in other words, Biog is wrong, because whatever music you make is serious in approach, regardless to being regarded as rock and roll or put in a in a shop's rack rock and roll, and the other one is serious music.
Correct.
I see. Well, theater. Yeah, you recently had 2 plays.
No, I've written them. They haven't been produced yet.
I see. No, I mean, you see, the bike is not right, so that's the only thing I had to. I see. So you are expanding into all these areas. I mean, and movies being an old love of yours since you were 16 or something. I mean, is there a way to stop you?
Because you can't. It's hard to expand into movies because it costs so much more money to make a movie than it does to make a record. And I'm self-financed.
But if I'm not joking, you were the one of the first to have an independent label.
That's true.
Oh, when did you realize that you can be self-employed in the industry that does not, until that time, did not allow self-employment?
I realized that at the point where that first independent label deal was a result of a lawsuit that was brought against MGM. They were happy to give me an independent deal because we caught them doing something with the books that was not right. So they figured, this stuff will never sell. He'll be out of business in 15 minutes. Let him do it. But my arrangement is unique in not only in the fact that I'm self-employed, but that I own all my masters. I own the rights to everything that I do. Most people who make records do not. And I fought for that. And I think that it was worth fighting for.
Yeah, I suppose so. So, can you remember what was the first and when did you get your first guitar?
First guitar that I played on was my father's guitar.
So what was actually the first guitar you owned? Was it after the movie, the Run Home Slow?
No, the first one that I owned, yes. Because prior to that time I rented the guitar. I rented a Telecaster from a music store in Ontario, California. But the first one that I was able to buy was the one after Run Home Slow. It was a DS5 Gibson Switchmaster.
Mm-hmm. And what is the one you use now?
It's a customized Stratocaster. The only thing on this guitar that is Fender is the body. Everything else on it is custom. It's a custom neck, it has custom electronics, custom pickups.
Do you use it?
Floyd Rose tremolo.
Do you use it in the studio as well as on the stage?
I just started using this particular guitar in July, and usually when I go on tour, I take a number of guitars and change them during the show. I've always, like the 82 tour, I changed a lot. In this tour, I haven't. Just play this one guitar.
Mm-hmm. Right, and the other part of the same article has got to be your thoughts on some of your contemporaries and your people, if you don't mind. People like Chuck Berry?
Chuck Berry? Well, I used to like Chuck Berry when I was in high school. Songs like Havana Moon and Wee Wee Hours, which were the flip sides of the hits that we had, the more bluesy things. And his main innovation, besides the duck walk choreography, was the multiple string guitar solos. The lines were harmonizing because you were playing on two strings at once. There was another guitar player that used to do that named Jimmy Nolan, who I had a lot of respect for.
B.B. King?
I like B.B. I've seen him on television before I went on this tour, and he was still good.
No, yeah, I've seen it recently and I thought he was amazing. Keith Richards?
I don't know anything about Keith Richards.
Jimi Hendrix?
I knew Jimmy, and I think that the best thing you can say about Jimmy is there is a person who never should use drugs.
John McLaughlin?
I met John. I think he's a great guitar player, and I think that he's probably done a lot to educate American audiences to some aspects of Eastern music that they wouldn't have come into contact with before. We did a tour with McLaughlin, with old Mahavishnu. Did 11 concerts with him.
Lowell George?
No, there's another guy who shouldn't have used drugs.
Eric Clapton?
I don't know Eric. I haven't seen him in years and years. There's another guy who shouldn't have used drugs.
Jeff Beck?
One of my favorite guitar players on the planet. I think he's from a melodic standpoint, and just in terms of the conception of what he plays, he's fabulous. I like that.
Rory Gallagher?
We worked 2 jobs with Rory Gallagher on this tour, and he's still playing the blues.
Jimmy Page?
I don't know anything about Jimmy.
Peter Green?
Don't know.
Jerry Garcia?
We did 1 concert with Garcia on this tour, but they were finished playing before I got to they were the opening act, and I didn't see any of the set.
Pete Townsend?
I've met Pete, but I don't know what I can say about his guitar playing.
Robert Fripp?
I've never heard of Robert Fripp record.
Richie Blackmore?
I think I've met Richie too. I'm not really familiar with the work of these people, because you have to understand I'm not a pop consumer and listen to a lot of
No, well, I was going to ask you at the end of it. I mean, do you actually listen to the records at all?
Well, what I do is I take cassettes with me on the road, because sometimes you sit in a hotel room and you just want to listen to something.
Or the airport or something, yeah. Okay.
But what I take is not rock and roll. I have Chopin, I have Purcell, I have Webern, I have Perez, I have Bulgarian music. I don't listen to rock and roll.
No? Carlos Santana?
We worked with Carlos Santana in Cologne in 1980 or 81, and it was a similar situation. We did 2 shows at the Sport Palace in Cologne. They opened the first show, we closed it. We opened the second show, and they closed it. So I've never heard them play.
So, as you said, you don't listen to the popular music, and at least don't expect that you know Eddie Van Halen.
I do know Eddie. He comes over to the house because he hangs out with my son.
Oh, I see. But do you know him as a guitar
Oh
player?
yeah, he and my son play together, and it's fabulous. But there's another guy that shouldn't use drugs.
Presume you don't know The Edge from your tour.
The Edge?
Stuart Adamson from Big Country. What would be your thoughts on the original guitar player of the Mothers? I.e. yourself?
Well, there's one other guy whose work I know that should be included in that list, who I respect, and that's Alan Holdsworth, because he's also one of the blues.
No, I was going to ask you who was your favorite guitar player.
Well, my original favorite guitar player was Johnny Guitar Watson. Not from a technical standpoint, but from listening to what his notes meant in the context in which they were played. And also Guitar Slim, who's the first guitar player that I ever heard that had distortion, even during the 50s. And in a strange way, I think I probably derived more of my style from his approach to the guitar, from the solos that I heard then.
And so you haven't told me your thoughts on yourself as a guitar player.
Well, I do something really different on the guitar. I don't so much play the guitar as make up stuff. And I'm dealing with the notes that I play during a solo. I conceive it as a composition that's happening instantly at the time, but it's, you have 2 minutes to fill up or 9 minutes to fill up or whatever it is. You have a piece of time which is anywhere from 2 to 9 minutes long, and you're going to decorate it with notes. You're going to make a composition in there. The quality of that composition is determined by what you're physically capable of playing at that moment in time, what the rhythm section will allow you to play, and whether or not the keyboard player who's supplying the harmonic climate is going to mess up what you're playing by sticking in his favorite jazz chord right there. These are all the dangers that a person faces when improvising a guitar solo. There's some guitar players who will practice their solos and it will always be perfect and it'll be the same every night, and I don't do that. When it's time to play, I don't know what I'm going to play until I start doing it. And then an idea will pop up and I'll just develop it in the same way that I would develop an idea on a piece of paper, except that I don't have to wait to hear it. I get to hear it as it's coming out.
And the last question on this section is, what would be the future of guitar, or rather, how do you see the future of guitar in the increasingly synth and keyboard-oriented music?
There will always be a market for people who want to hear guitars squealing and oinking and bending and twanging and making sounds like guitars are supposed to make. And then there is a market of people who are interested in fashion, and they will start to hate all those other old guitar sounds in favor of guitar sounds which are not like guitar sounds. They're merely played in guitar position but sound like synthesizers. There's a market for that. There are people who want to hear it. But I don't believe that will be the ultimate future of the guitar.
And before he takes over completely, I'd like to ask you two questions, which I'm personally interested in. The first is sometime in the New York City, John Lennon and Yoko. Well, how was it? How did it come about and all that?
The day before the show, a journalist in New York City woke me up, knocked on the door, he's standing there with a tape recorder, he says, "Frank, I'd like to introduce you to John Lennon." Waiting for me to gasp and fall on the floor, And I said, "Okay, well, come on in." And we sat around and talked, and I think the first thing he said to me was, "Well, you're not as ugly as I thought you would be." So anyway, I thought he had a pretty good sense of humor. So I invited him to come down and jam with us at the Fillmore East. And we had already booked him a recording truck because we were making the Live at the Fillmore album at that time. And after they had sat in with us, an arrangement was made that we would both have access to the tapes. He wanted to release it, with his mix, and I had the right to release it with my mix. So that's how that one section came out. But the bad part is, there's a song that I wrote called King Kong, which we played that night. And I don't know whether it was Yoko's idea or John's idea, but they changed the name of the song to Jam Rag, gave themselves writing and publishing credit on it, and stuck it on the album and never paid me. Really, obviously not a jam session song. It's got a melody, it's got bass line. It's obviously an organized song. A little bit disappointing. And I've never released my version of the mixes of that night.
Do you ever intend to?
One day, yeah. Because they would be drastically different. There were things that were edited out of their version, and certain words that were being sung that were removed because of the editorial slant that they wanted to apply to the material. I have a slightly different viewpoint on it.
And the last question is, you've been producing a 10-volume set of the Suits.
Never of the Suits. No, the Suits don't have 10 volumes worth of material, but what will come out is, now that I own all of the masters for my stuff, the first box that has the first 7
Mothers.
All the early Mother stuff, plus the mystery disc, which has some Suits material on it. That is now ready for release in the United States. The 10-record set that you referred to was live recordings of the early Mothers of Invention. And I can release that, but I'm not going to until after I've re-released the whole catalog of the basic albums that I just got back from this lawsuit. And that's coming out 7 records per year with 1 box every 5 years.
Good. A lot to listen to them. Thank you very much indeed.